As usual, leave it to NASCAR to screw everything up, to take a wonderful thing and just make it worse and worse and worse and worse. Then take the one shining moment over the last 20 years and turn that into a negative. Only NASCAR. Only NASCAR and their leadership can make this sort of thing happen. This is a absolutely unbelievable thing. I don't know how they've taken such a wonderful sport. I mean, a sport that I was absolutely 100% obsessed with and just turned into what it is now. It's not even a shell of itself, it's a shell of the shell of itself. I stopped watching NASCAR really after the 2013 season. I kind of kept up with it 2014, which is the first year of the playoff style final 10 races. They used to call it the chase for the championship. Once upon a time, they actually just raced the entire season, and then whoever had the most points at the end was the awarded the championship. Because every single driver was present in every single race. Every single team was present in every single race under the exact same conditions at the exact same time. So there's no need for playoffs. But I guess in NASCAR's mind there is, and they have just gone so far and doubled down on the gimmicks, on just taking it out of the driver's hands, taking it out of racing's hands, and basically just saying this is a reality show. This is not a serious sport. This is not a sport to be taken seriously. And they've done that, and the result is just a decline, a major decline in ratings, in attendance, in mainstream even being talked about or mentioned. You know, I've talked a lot about the WNBA on this channel and how badly they're run as an organization. Well, at least they didn't take what was once a great thing and turn it into something trash. I mean, that's exactly what NASCAR's done. And today at Martinsville is no different. I made a video not long ago talking about this is the 20th anniversary of a horrible tragedy with Hendrick Motorsports. And, you know, it's still a tragedy. I'll still never say it's not a tragedy. It was a horrible day. It was a time when NASCAR was very, very cared about. And now, you know, Hendrick was the beneficiary of something bad. So, for those who don't know, the championship four, Christopher Bell made a last lap, pretty crazy move, but pretty fun move. It wasn't quite as fun and as crazy as the one moment, the one shining moment I spoke about earlier, which was Ross Chastain's wall ride, the Hail Melon, as I like to call it, which I'll get into here in a second, to get into the final championship four. I'll get into that in a second. There's just so many nuances here. There's so much horrible mess that you have to explain. So the final four is going to be Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, both of which are Penske Ford drivers, Tyler Reddick, Lily. Lily's going to be in the last four, aren't you, Lily? They may as well. As much of a gimmick as they're doing this little squeaky thing here, she may as well be in it. But fall on my couch, good lord. But there's going to be them. Tyler Reddick was driving for 2311 Racing. They're suing NASCAR, as a video I made earlier. The team Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin owns. Denny Hamlin did not make the Final Four, so he will once again not win the championship again in his career. So I guess there's one positive from today. That's a good one. He's officially eliminated. This cat's going to be officially eliminated from my house. She keeps trying to claw my couch. She's way more fun than NASCAR is, let me tell you that. And it was going to be Christopher Bell, Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota. He's done a great job. He's taken over that 20 car, and after years of instability there, he's really given it a good ride. He made a move that was not the same as the one from a few years ago, but he got disqualified, and they put a Hendrick Chevrolet in. There's going to be no Chevrolets in the Final Four. There's going to be no Hendrick cars, no Hendrick Chevrolets in the Final Four. So for those who don't know, NASCAR, like I said, used to be a wonderful sport, had the best point system out there. Because, like I said, every team was present at the exact same track every week, so they had the exact same conditions. They raced at the exact same time. So, you know, conditions weren't a thing. They had the exact same competition every week. And there was no need for a playoff, but back in 2004, NASCAR was just booming in popularity and on an upward trajectory. And I guess they decided they wanted more. And they made the decision that year to basically, that's a 36 race schedule. So after race 26 with 10 races to go, to basically reset the points. Whoever's in the top 10 at the time was reset. Then they had basically a 10 race runoff for the championship. And Kurt Busch won it that year, who would have never won under the old system. He was so far out by the time the 10th race or the 26th race came around. It was unreal, but he caught a hot streak and went on to win the championship. And they've just doubled down on the gimmicks ever since. The fans hated it from the word go. And sure enough, soon all that great momentum that NASCAR built through the 80s and 90s into the early 2000s, it just dissipated. But they just kept doubling down. They started throwing debris cautions. Every time a leader would get out to a 2 or 3 second lead, there's debris on the track. You'd never show it. It became a running joke. You knew exactly what was going on. And Hendrick Motorsports always seems to be the beneficiary of that. That nobody's benefited from their messery more than they have. And that happened again tonight. So they just kept doubling down. They expanded it to 12 teams would make the final 10 races, and they started tinkering with wins and getting a wild card and just all the stuff that's not necessary in NASCAR. Back in 2013, the final race to set the final championship runoff for the final 10 was held at Richmond, and there was all sorts of radio communications, teams of the same manufacturer, talking on the radio, intentionally manipulating it. Clint Boyer spun out on purpose for his teammate. All sorts of stuff was going on. It was a mess. They wound up putting 13 people. They just gave Jeff Gordon a spot because he was left out of it. He wasn't good enough that day. Either way, but because it happened the way it did, they kicked a Toyota out and just put Jeff Gordon in. Jeff Gordon's 24 car in. Hold that thought for a second. As a 13th driver. He didn't win it. His driver, Jimmy Johnson, won it, but that's another story for another day. So then going into 2014, they decided they were going to make those last 10 races a knockout style. The first 9 races were broken up into 3 race segments. 16 drivers made it. And every 3 races, they knocked 4 drivers out. So then after the first 3 races, there was 12. And after the next 3, then there was 8. Then 12, and then with just 4 to go, there would be 8 drivers, and over the next 3 races, those 8 drivers would figure out who would be the last 4 who would go to the final race, and whoever finished first among those 4 was the champion. So basically it came down to a 1-race champion, and it's been a mess. The championships become not respectable. The sport's become not respectable. They've gone to stage racing. They've just said, look, you're going to run this amount of time, we're going to throw a caution. And so they just basically said, we're not even trying to be serious. And then just the manipulations, the rules, and then tonight, it really just showed itself in the worst way. And I don't know where they even go from now, how they can even look themselves as a legitimate sport from here on out. 2 years ago, second to last race in Martinsville, Ross Chastain, 7th generation watermelon farmer from Florida. 7 generations of farming watermelons in Florida. Just one of those few throwback, like, this guy, went to racing to try to save himself from having to farm watermelons. Like, Dale Earnhardt, went to racing to save himself from having to work in the mills his whole life. Like, people in the early part of the sport went to racing so they wouldn't have to run moonshine their whole lives illegally and having to outrun the law. Just kind of a real throwback story. And he was out of the championship 4. He needed to gain about 5 spots at Martinsville. A flat half-mile track, which you just don't do. So he rode the wall. Going into turn 4, he kept his foot on the gas, held the car against the wall, rode it all the way around that sharp hairpin turn, passed enough cars and made it in. And kicked Denny Hamlin out. I mean, it was just such a cool moment. Nobody ever even thought about that. It was such a viral moment. People were talking about it online. And did NASCAR capitalize on it? No. This is their chance to make a star, to make a new star, to put themselves back in the spotlight. They had no idea what to do with it. And that's again when I talk about you need the diversity of idea and thought. People think diversity comes from, what you look like. NASCAR has and always has been run by a bunch of old white dudes. But that's not the problem. The problem is the old white dudes running it all think the same. And that's the thing. When people go for diversity, they might get people that aren't old white dudes, but they all think the same. They might not look like me, but they think all just alike, just like all these old white dudes running NASCAR think just alike, who think nothing like me. That's the problem. And so not only did NASCAR not capitalize on this, they immediately outlawed it. Immediately was saying, how are we going to outlaw this? One of the coolest things ever to happen, and NASCAR's the message was clear. Don't think outside the box. You have to stick to the script. We're running a script here. Do not go off script like that. So tonight, Christopher Bell in the number 20 Joe Gibbs Toyota was a little bit behind William Byron, who's now driving the number 24 Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet ever since Jeff Gordon retired about 10 years ago. Byron was in. Now he was in. There was a lot of communication between the Chevrolets of Austin Dillon driving the number 3 Richard Childress car that Dale Earnhardt made so famous, and ironically the number 1 Chevrolet that Ross Chastain was in. He never even made the playoffs this year. Of course he didn't. Why would you make a star out of him? Why would you, if you're going to rig it up, at least rig it for somebody interesting? Nah, can't do that. So there's a lot of communication being caught on the radio between the 1 team and the 3 team, making sure the other Chevrolet gets in, because otherwise there's not going to be a Chevrolet in. It was the Penske Ford's Joey Logano, who's 2-time champion, probably going to be 3-time now. The defending champion, another Penske Ford of Ryan Blaney. And like I said, Tyler Reddick in the 2311 Toyota, which is really a Joe Gibbs Toyota. It's just Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan own the car, but they get all their stuff from Gibbs. And it's a Gibbs run team. And Christopher Bell drove into the corner, went up to the wall, and rode the wall for about half of the corner. So it wasn't even, I don't see where the advantage is. The way Chastain did it and the way Christopher Bell did it was just completely different. That's just... And secondly, why was it outlawed in the first place? Safety? This is when they care about safety. They cared about safety. They wouldn't have restrictor plate racing the way they do. They would have mandated... They wouldn't always wait until something happens to mandate safety measures. They took until Joe Weatherly's death in the 1960s when they didn't have window nets and his head went out, or they didn't have shoulder straps, and his head went out the window at Riverside when he hit the wall driver's side on the road course, and it killed him. He was a 2-time defending champion, and they mandated better safety straps. They didn't mandate a window net until Richard Petty looked like he died from not having a... Luckily he's still alive, but in 1970 at Darlington he had a horrible wreck where he flipped and was hanging out of the car when it was over with, looking pretty dead. But luckily he was alive, and I think he raced the next week. And he's still alive today, but that was on the Worldwide Sports Live on ABC, and that was a bad look, so they mandated window nets retroactively. Rubber fuel cells used to be cars, every time they crashed, the fuel cell would explode and fire would happen, and happened over and over again. NASCAR never did anything until their most marketable star at the time in the mid-60s, Fireball Roberts, who was basically Dale Earnhardt before Dale Earnhardt. Ironically, his nickname was Fireball because he was a pitcher and threw it fast, but he got caught up in a fireball from a bad fuel tank. Had to go to the hospital, lived for a couple weeks, but then died of pneumonia as a result of his burns. So then they put the rubber fuel cells in that didn't explode so easy. And then, of course, obviously Dale Earnhardt. 3 people in the year 2000 died of a basilar skull fracture. They hit the wall head on, and their head went forward, and the top part of their skull disconnected from their neck, severing their arteries in there and killing them instantly. NASCAR never did anything, never mandated any type of head and neck restraint, despite the drivers pining for it, or openly saying, hey, we need this, we need something. Didn't do it. February the 18th, 2001. Dale Earnhardt, the most marketable star in the history of the sport, and the person that they are still marketing, even almost 50, to be their guy going forward, dies on the final lap in front of everybody of the Daytona 500 of a basilar skull fracture. Then they started mandating head and neck restraint devices. So that's NASCAR. They're always reactive. They're never proactive. They don't care about safety, so I don't want to hear about that. And by the way, ever since they've mandated restrictor plates in the wake of Bobby Allison in 1987 almost going into the grandstands because they were going so fast, they still had a lot of cars bounce into the catch fence and even go over the wall in areas where there weren't grandstands at the time when hey, there's Loki. When they didn't have catch fences all the way around the track. Jimmy Horton, Talladega 1993, flipped out of the track. There's no grandstands, but he flipped over the banking and somehow survived. That's NASCAR. And so they've decided to penalize Christopher Bell back enough spots to put the Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet of William Byron into the Final Four. It's bullshit. That's all there is to it. That's complete horse shit. And I don't know how NASCAR can live with themselves. That was a blatant attempt by Chevrolets to get him in. They got him in. Christopher Bell still found a way to get up there. And NASCAR said, no, that's illegal. Our cool moment that we took no advantage of, yeah, we're using that as precedence. So are they going to do anything about the blatant manipulation from the other Chevrolets? Of course not. It's Hendrick Motorsports. They want them in, so... Good job, NASCAR. You screwed up again, and this is why nobody watches your shit anymore. And that's why you're in the position you're in, so... I don't know, man. I don't know how you can mess something up so good, so bad, but... I mean... I don't know how much longer this sport can even exist. I don't really care. So... Thank you guys for watching these videos. Thank you for the crazy subscriber count, and I'll be talking to you in a little bit. Thank you.